Okay, it is 4:01 and I'll call the meeting to order. Mary, would you go over the governor's remote attendance policy?
Yes, this January 19th open meeting of the Town Area Plan Work Group, a subcommittee of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission, is convening via video conference pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted, and this meeting is being recorded. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment if any members of the public are in attendance. Henry, do you want to do the roll call?
Yes, I will. Mary?
Here.
Lee?
Here.
Marcia?
Here.
Mary Ann?
Here.
Mickey?
Here.
And I see no Allison or Reagan.
Yeah,
We do have a quota.
if they log in, I'll note the time.
All right, thank you, Lee. We do have a quota. All right. Approval of the agenda from December 15th.
The minutes?
Or the minutes, I'm sorry.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second, Marianne.
Mary Ann, thank you. All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, we got minutes. And I skipped over the agenda. Anybody want to discuss it? Take that as a no. Okay. Mickey, do you want to go over that sheet you sent back in whatever that was, first part of December?
Yeah, I would like to I guess I would. I'm sorry I missed that meeting. I got some things mixed up.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find it. Shouldn't take me long. There you go.
Is it in the minutes from the December meeting? Is that what we're talking about, Henry?
Yeah. Yes.
Can you put that on the screen? I'm trying.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that for you, Mickey.
Thank you.
You get set up.
Okay, I think I found my notes.
Okay, so you should be seeing a document that starts number 5, natural and cultural resources.
Yep, we do. Yeah, this is obviously aimed at the HDC and perhaps other boards that might be ruling on projects in neighborhoods. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to add to this. Did you talk about you talked about it last week, last meeting, I assume.
Yes.
I guess the reason I brought it up to begin with is that quite often I'm at every HDC meeting these days, and I see the projects that are going on in town, and I'm often hearing that they look toward precedents in the neighborhood, and with the area in particular that I'm thinking of right now is down on Angola Street, where a couple of pretty large new houses were proposed for that end of Angola where they're developing the Mill Hill property. And you know, a lot of the applicants' references are saying that there's, you know, there's some good sized houses, large houses on Angola Street, and others in the neighborhood. So they were trying to set up, you know, establish a precedent for large houses on their project site. And you know, the reality is that that end of Angola Street has, it's very open for one. It's much more rural feeling than, say, Mill Street around the other side of the pony field, and even the other end of Angola up closer to the windmill. Anyway, there are some smaller houses right around it, and it's, you know, that I'm just trying to let you know, establish a criteria for the HTC to use to look really close by, not necessarily, you know, in the larger neighborhood, but in the very proximate neighborhood, to look at precedents for scale of houses. A similar project came up on Vestal Street, almost across, very close to the old jail up in that area. You know, the out of town end of Vestal Street, and similar issues, large houses closer to town, smaller houses at the end, and they were trying to build a pretty large house. So this is just to provide some guidance to those, you know, to the HTC. They're not necessarily going to look at the area plan, the town area plan, but it can be brought up as a something they should be looking at. And that's what I think that's what the area plan is there for, is to give guidance to our local committees in questions like these. I guess that's regarding the scale, the side yards. Similar issues. I mean, that sometimes there just isn't any choice as to where they need to add on if they have to add on. But if they have a choice, if there's a sufficient rear space in the rear yard, that's where they should be directed to add on rather than to the side. Driveways. I mean, it's almost fairly obvious. We don't really want to see double car wide brick, you know, paved driveways down in the town rural or town residential areas.
So, Mickey, I had trouble understanding what you were driving at, pardon the pun, with the driveway, where it says within 30 feet from the street. I didn't know if you meant that the driveway had to be less than 30 feet deep on the lot, less than 30 feet wide, if there are no driveways within 30 feet of a street. I really didn't get the reference.
I understand the confusion there. No, what I'm trying to say is the first 30 feet of the driveway should be single wide, and then it can widen out to a double car width, so they could park two cars near the back of the property, but just up, we don't want to see right up on the street to, you know, a double wide parking space right on Fair Street, Orange Street, you know, those areas. But a single wide driveway leading back to a double space is more acceptable.
I think we need to be more explicit if you want to say that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, but that's it's a good point.
Mickey, two points. The first is that town regulations permit side by side. And so this would be guidance, perhaps not in accord with regulations. And then on my street, Albert Johnson's garage or garbage yard is now a mega mansion. And the apron is double wide. So the world changes. I'm sympathetic to what you're saying. I'm just not sure how enforceable this would be.
Well, it would be the first time that the HDC has stricter rules than zoning regulations. You know,
Okay.
the HDC, even though zoning allows a 30-foot tall house anywhere, mostly anywhere on the island, the HDC has much more specific criteria in terms of the height for buildings. So there are a number of areas, I can't think of any others at the moment, where the HDC overrides zoning. And that's what they should, that's their job, is to make those decisions regarding aesthetics rather than numbers and zoning criteria.
So let me address the mechanics of this recommendation. I'm not advocating for or against it, but the HDC is not bound by an area plan, and I find it highly unlikely that they would pull an area plan for any neighborhood and consult it before they would render a judgment on a specific application. So if we're asking for something that we want the HDC to take into consideration, then I would suggest that what we're really asking for is to address the HDC's regulations, whatever they may be, or guidelines, or building with Nantucket in mind, and to make a recommendation to affect that, not to simply say in an area plan that we think this is good HDC behavior.
Well, I understand what you're saying, Mary, and I think that's true. But area plans, I mean, isn't that the purpose of area plans, is to guide the town into making decisions about development and other, you know, forward-thinking planning, basically.
In general, I would say yes, but I think they're mainly going to be used by the planning department, and HDC is, you know, we're getting further and further away. You know, if you're saying that you're attending HDC meetings, when was the last time you heard them reference an area plan? You know, we have them for Surfside and Sconset and Tom Nevers and.
Yeah, it actually, it did come up recently, and that's kind of what gave me the idea for this, is that it was actually a neighbor to somebody brought up the area plan. I'm not sure how she got this information, but it was in the Brain Point area regarding open, you know, space and open views, and she referenced the area plan to try to, because part of the area plan for Brain Point was saying that it's the like along Holbert Avenue and Easton Street, the vistas of the harbor are really important traditional scenic views, more or less. And the trend has been to build fences and tall hedges and massive houses that are eroding at those views, being able to look back into the harbor. And, you know, they didn't ignore her. They took that to heart to some degree. I was on that area plan work group when we came up with that sort of that concept and put it in there. So
But I think that's a great example then, and I'm glad we're having this discussion to bring that to light.
yeah, so I think that area plans, even though the HDC is going to be oblivious to what an area plan says, but somebody can bring it up and say, by the way, you know, whether they're for or against a particular concept, they can bring it up at an HDC meeting and say, this is part of your planning guidelines. This is what you should be thinking. And I actually have heard it referenced back on the Surfside area. I think it has an area plan that says that houses along probably Nonantum and the roads parallel to the shore in Surfside should be limited to 25 feet. And I don't pay much attention to those applications anymore. But I know that that was referenced many years ago. Maybe it was a project that I was working on, I can't remember, but I did hear that referenced as, you know, a guideline from the area plan that you need to keep the houses low.
Well, great. That's really good to know. And you know, maybe the answer is both, not one or the other.
In terms of building with Nantucket in mind?
Yeah, in terms of, you know, having something that we want to advocate strongly for, not only in the area plan, but also making a recommendation that it be encoded in more prominent way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, I mean, I would love to see that in building with Nantucket in mind. That's these days almost a harder, you know, bar to cross than than us creating an area plan. It's, who knows when they're gonna modify the building with the ethic in mind. But so, further down, I've got something about noise, and this is something that comes up, quite often at the HTC, in fact, mostly to do with swimming pools, but also to do with air conditioning equipment and pool equipment. The HTC doesn't like to get involved in issues that aren't visually, you can't see them. Especially seen from a public way. And people quite often bring up the noise related to swimming pools. Now, swimming pools are almost a non-issue these days in our area because they're not allowed anymore. So it's in this particular situation, spas, fire pits, hard surface game courts, they are still allowed. Not sure about spas.
Spas are banned in both historic districts.
Yeah, that's good. And who knows? I mean, there's not much room for a hard surface game court downtown in our area, but you never know. But I guess I'm just, trying to introduce the concept that noise could be used as a deciding, factor in permitting specific elements of a project.
I just want to point out that I think spas are permitted. The recent warrant article by Ann Dewis was to limit the size of the spa, and between those that are too large to be permitted and those that could be. I don't think they were excluded. Could be wrong. Been a while since we dealt with that.
Yeah.
I
Go
do
ahead.
remember that we had quite a discussion, Mickey, when you weren't here at that meeting about driveways, about noise. I can't quite remember it all, but my first question had been just a question of where items were going to be placed within the area plan. This is listed under natural and cultural resources, whereas, it can be in a number of sections. It could be under housing, I think. It could be under transportation with driveways, or and I'm noting at the top that it says the year 2022. I assume it was 2023.
Probably. Yeah.
So that was really, and I think that goes along with the question about that one can take some of the ideas here and put it into certain sections, certain components, but then they may also be earmarked to go into implementation. So if we're specifically requesting changes to the guideline book, then that would be added as another section. And in which case, I think, the more specific we can be, the better. Especially on any number of the items, like with driveways, to say as inconspicuous as possible. To have a nice brick surface may be considered inconspicuous by somebody. So I think we just need to, if we want to work with that. I think that Mary had a number of, I think, good, interesting comments about the levels of noise and how much we can actually control behavior with noise.
Yeah, I was speaking about the difference between controlling noise that is created by something inorganic, equipment, vehicles, and so on, versus controlling noise made by people. And we can't really legislate people's behavior or prohibit them from existing. That was the distinction that I was trying to draw, so that it's one thing to regulate, noise from swimming pool equipment. it's another thing to regulate noise from the use of a swimming pool by the people who own the property.
But, maybe that's a good, a good reason perhaps to limit the elements or to limit swimming pools or spas or swimming pools to, which, that's mainly the reason that swimming pools have been banned from downtown already, is because of the noise they generate. It's not because people don't really want to see them, because they can hide them pretty easily. But nobody wants to be right next door to a swimming pool because they're very noisy things. Noise made by people. But if you try to prohibit those elements that attract those kinds of noises, that might be a start.
Well, it sounds to
To
me like,
Mickey's point, water is a hard reflective surface.
well, I think in another way that we're talking about elements of design or of living that are encouraging larger gathering areas. So if you have a fire pit, you're encouraging larger numbers of people to gather or to be in a swimming pool. The one that isn't listed here that I find historically inappropriate according to any HDC guidelines is when you have a house, which there are many of with high basements, that are building rear decks. And they're really party decks. There are a number of them around, and to me, they're akin to a swimming pool. You can have 20 or 30 people there and on a regular basis doing some sort of happy hour. And beyond that it's just that the architecture was never intended to have large 20-foot square decks on the backs of them that are elevated 6, 5, 8 feet higher than a neighbor, or balconies. It was not part of the architecture.
Yeah.
So to me, I consider that even to be more critical to the historical appropriateness of the architecture of the downtown. They're small, dense lots. And if you put a balcony, there are a number of them you can see, or, second floor decks, even first floor, they're being approved all the time. And I consider it to be an invitation to have a large outdoor gathering space like a swimming pool.
Well, you're right, Marcia. It's just as annoying and probably more frequently used when the decks are in the backyard. That might be a taller ask to try to ban decks rather than swimming pools. But I certainly see your point in that regard.
It's just like the one that we looked at the other day for the Historic Structures Advisory Group had 2 balconies on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, your opposition to that, reasonably so. But then that's like building a big deck. And the jurisdiction, the legislation refers to historical appropriateness. So although I agree with you that it's a taller order, it's not when you put it up against what's historically appropriate for the architecture.
So at 4:25, Allison King was able to join us, Lee.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have much more to add to that document that I submitted. I have that note at the end about commercial STRs, and that was like a big question. Are we, is it reasonable to throw that in if they're still allowed? I didn't know the answer to that question.
Could you remind us, Mary, what was said, if you could summarize from the minutes? Because I'm sure.
Yeah, this is the actual minutes document. So let's see.
There you go.
Here, So here it is, the final sentence. If you can see what I've highlighted on the screen there.
Yes, ma'am, this is he.
So one of the things we have to be careful of in an area plan is that we don't have an avenue with an area plan to create town-wide impacts. This is neighborhood impacts only. So the topic of short-term rentals, especially in the current environment, I think is probably outside the scope of what we can address in an area plan. It is not something that is unique to our area. I can't see that how you could make a case for that in any way. Whether it's taboo, I think we said, nothing's taboo. It's just a question of whether or not the commission would find it acceptable to include. You might be able to make a advisory statement. You might be able to state, what the feelings of the group were. But I think it's unlikely that the area plan would have any legislative impact or regulatory impact in that kind of an area.
I kind of agree with what you're saying, Mary. I think the only distinction we might be able to establish between us and the rest of the island is how dense the houses are, the dense the neighborhoods are, because an STR, commercial or otherwise, in our area will have more impact on the neighborhood than one in Surfside, for instance.
Well, I think that, there are a lot of dense neighborhoods now on Nantucket, Wisconsin, certainly. There are a lot of, look at Old South Road, Nashop, Neshaquisset. There are a lot of dense neighborhoods. So I don't think we're unique in that respect.
Yeah, well, not unique, but yeah.
Well, I don't know that I believe that we need to be unique, because whatever we're observing and whatever we're bringing to the table to talk about the area that we're living in, if we were to just not even talk about STRs, but talk about quality of life and about the neighborhood and the evolution of change in the neighborhood and what we're all experiencing or witnessing. Of course, it would be great, which we don't have at the time, are some of the statistics about the numbers. So how many houses are year-rounders, how many are seasonal, how many are for rent? Just as an observation, just as a statistical statement of what the neighborhood is, and is there an issue?
Well, remember that the concept of the area plan is to demonstrate the ways in which this neighborhood needs different treatment than is given in the master plan for the entire community. So it's not a forum for neighborhood grievances. It's really a planning document to say what is unique about this neighborhood that needs attention from planning. That is not something that they would need to pay attention to in another neighborhood.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I thought I was suggesting, that there are aspects that are unique.
Folks, I don't know if this is relevant, but annual town meeting will have warrant articles. I'm not sure whether it's select board or citizens or both on STRs. And that, in other words, that may make anything we say moot, or what we say may be in support or in opposition to these warrant articles. Depends upon what they say.
Again, I think you might be able to make a statement along the lines of, and again, I'm not advocating for or against this, just as an example, saying that the community supports the efforts to minimize the impacts of short-term rentals due to their intensity in this district. But I don't think, again, that you could have a legislative or regulatory impact coming from an area plan. But you might be able to, make a statement of preference.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the area plans can't be, they're not enforceable, they're not like regulatory documents, but they can influence other, boards that are either creating documents or monitoring them, monitoring the development. So I think what you just said, I thought might be applicable. I think we could at least say that we whatever you just said, I forget your words, but it sounded like it would be suitable to include. It's sort of a light way of bringing it up, but knowing that we're not enforcing anything.
Yeah, and again, I was offering an example, not an opinion, but you can take from it what you want and put whatever you want in the area plan.
Any other comments? I take that as a no.
I don't know. I don't kind of know where to go with it. I wish we, as I said, had some statistics or input from our own group saying, do you see it as a unique issue to our area? To say something, whether you're referring to short-term rentals or not, is there a change in the area that makes that a unique issue to be addressed in some way?
Well, I wouldn't call it unique. I mean, other areas, as Mary pointed out, there are other areas that are just as dense, but it doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't include it just because they haven't. It is different than most of the island. Most of the island is much more spread out. So to some degree, it's slightly specific to our area.
Yeah. Does anyone have an area that you live in that you find it to be an issue or a growing issue?
I think, Marcia, that the notion, which I hope we reflect, is that we're encouraging the residential nature of the town area. And that would mean more, if not full-time residents, residers, it would mean encouraging longer rental periods rather than shorter.
Can I just so I have been coming to Nantucket for 20 some number of years, and I was one of those short-term renters. I could only take 2 weeks vacation. I would come with my family. I would rent in town. Well, I used to rent out in Wowinet, and then I started renting in town. And I didn't think I was a particularly bad neighbor when I was visiting, so maybe I should recuse myself from the conversation. But it is a way that people can come and experience the wonderfulness of the island and be a part of the community. It led to me buying a house and then planning on retiring. So and I didn't have to stay at my friends' houses. That was sort of the key piece, that I could keep coming and I was welcome as a guest that wasn't staying with them, more so than I would be if I had to sleep in someone's guest room. So that's my personal position. So I just want to make sure
Allison, this is an aside. I think when we were instructed on how best to form the work group, it was to make sure that we had people who were part-time residents so that we could get a blend of views.
Right.
No
so
guilt.
I'm a little longer
guilt.
part-time now because I'm a 2-month resident.
I know you're not, but no guilt need be expressed.
All right. Well, I just want to make sure I was clear.
I don't think there's anything wrong with probably the what you were doing, Allison. Of course, so many people have been doing this for generations. My grandmother rented her house out, and that's fine. I think it's the commercial ones that are generally, it's a general statement, but they're larger. They maxed out their property to get the right, as much profit as they can, and there's much more turnover. So I think there's probably a distinction from what you were doing compared to, what the concern is regarding commercial STRs.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Mary and Lee, have you had a chance to get together and
I have had a chance to review the document that Lee sent, and we need to compare notes and put something together for the committee, and I would be willing, if Lee is available, to try and do that for our next meeting. But I also wanted to suggest that there've been a number of changes at the NRTA since Gary Roberts became the administrator, and it might be a good idea to have him talk to us about how he sees that evolving and in the downtown area, and maybe we can give him ideas for how the residents of our area could be best served by the public transportation.
okay.
So you can cross off the note that you made, Henry. That was my question. I didn't know if we had already talked about inviting him.
No. Or if you did, I didn't write it down. Do you and Lee want to?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Lee.
just a quick aside, basically on NRTA. I'm not quite sure why but I've been to Vail, Colorado on several occasions. Once was for a meeting, once was to do cross-country skiing. And they had a bus system, and I believe it was free because they wanted, Vail's a very stretched out town. They wanted visitors to use the public garages adjacent to the interstate and then use the free bus to get around town. So the announcement that there's a 6-month trial of free buses rings an interesting and I think positive bell.
So Henry, can we see if he's available for our next meeting?
I'll check with him, yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, and in the meantime, Mary, you and I, you pick the time. And then I'll tell you if it'll work. Most of them will.
I have our next meeting is February 6th. That sound right?
If it's a Tuesday, yes.
Yeah. I think it is.
3 o'clock.
We're still continuing to meet at 3, I think, because Mickey has a conflict at 4.
Right.
Mary, I have a question, and I don't quite know the name of the report, but I know that I just am curious if you happen to know the status of a study being done about the HDC. And
That the news on that is coming. But I think that's the best information I have.
so, and do you know whether there's any kind of review process?
That's not my area. I think Leslie mentioned that it was underway and that there would be some news coming in the near future, but that's about all I know.
Thank you.
So you probably just want to call her directly and ask.
That was brought up at our historical commission meeting this morning. And I've gotten a note here, I'm not sure if it's accurate, but I've got a note anyway that says February 21st for the NAPC presentation maybe. So what day of the week is the 21st? It's a Wednesday, so that'd be a select board meeting. So that might be it. I can't swear by it, but that's what my note says.
Okay. Anything else? I take that as a no. All right, I have 441.
Bye-bye all.
Thank you.
I'll take that as a
Have an
unanimous.
official motion to adjourn.
Oh, we haven't done that yet.
Lee just did it. Allison seconded.
I seconded, yep.
Yeah. And Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye.